In this week's episode, we're looking at 8 signs you're a beginner drone filmmaker. Now, of course, there is nothing wrong with being a beginner, but on the assumption that you want to progress your skills all the way through to expert level, these 8 things you definitely want to keep in mind. Alina's away in Ukraine with our little baby visiting the family, so I felt a bit lonely. I thought I'd bring in a guest host. So welcome, Red Shirt Stu. How was that digital marketing course I sent you on? Yeah, no, it was good, thank you. I learnt loads of ways of promoting the 8-hour drone cinematography masterclass. You just kind of have to slip it into conversation. People don't like to think they're being sold to, so you have to be smart about it. Yeah, leave it with me. No, that's good to know. We'll just take it easy then. Okay, let's crack on with the tips. Avoid aimless flying. As we sit here in the middle of 2019, the cold hard truth is that the world has become a little bit numb to all our amazing drone shots. The internet's full of it and the surprise factor is not there anymore, so we need to raise the bar. No longer is it good enough just to present an aerial shot. We have to tell some kind of story, some kind of narrative, create suspense in that piece of work. Absolutely, and in the same way that buying a camera doesn't automatically make you a good photographer, buying a drone doesn't necessarily make you a good aerial filmmaker. So if you really want to get into the nuts and bolts of becoming a drone cinematographer, then we have an 8-hour drone cinematography masterclass that takes you from drone owner to drone pilot to drone cinematographer in an entertaining and informative way. There's a link in the description below with the discount code embedded. Is that alright? Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, just don't go too mad for it, but that was okay. Okay. Flying too high. One day I'm going to get t-shirts printed up saying just because you can fly high doesn't mean you should. Obviously the temptation when you get a drone is to stick it all the way up in the air and see what everything looks like from up there. But honestly, more often than not, that's not the right thing to do. For starters, when you're all the way up in the air, your sense of motion is decreased because you're further away from things. So in terms of creating dynamic, engaging images, it's harder to do. If you're shooting buildings, no one wants to see the roof of a building unless you're doing a roof inspection. You want to get some nice angle coming in from the side, creating some depth, some shadows, maybe get some layers in the shots by revealing that building from behind a tree. Flying all the way up in the air isn't going to achieve that. That's right, blue shirt Stu. And if you want to find out how to not fly high, then you can find out more in our 8. No, take it easy. Okay, no. Okay. Avoid auto exposure and auto white balance. There are many subjective things in this industry and there are many objective things, and objectively speaking, as a matter of fact, you never ever want to use auto white balance. You never want to see that color temperature shift during the shot. It looks incredibly amateurish and you'll never see it on TV or cinema. As for auto exposure, there can be a case made for that if you're doing a shot with an extreme change in exposure. So let's say you're going from inside to outside and there's no way you could possibly set the correct exposure for both those environments. As for the vast majority of shots, you don't want the exposure changing during the shot. It doesn't look that good, so you need to set a manual exposure. We had a comment once saying, this is madness. This means I need to change the exposure and go into the settings every single time I turn the drone around. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you not use auto exposure? And I'm afraid that's just the reality of the situation and of what we do. That's just how it works. You have to set a different exposure for every shot if the lighting conditions change. Long shots are boring shots. It's a painful home truth for us as drone filmmakers that our audience doesn't want to sit and watch 20-second shots one after the other. You go to an amazing location, you get some fantastic shots, you want to present this 10-minute video of all your best clips. No one wants to sit and watch that, and it's really hard to accept that as a drone filmmaker. Bad exposure. Blown out highlights are a guaranteed indicator that you're at the start of your journey as a drone filmmaker. You've either filmed incorrectly and you've overexposed the shot and not retained enough detail in those highlights, or you have had bad judgment in post-production when you've color corrected and blown out those highlights. I'm sorry for putting it that bluntly. The goal here is to retain as much detail in your highlights and your shadows so you have a nice balanced exposure. You need to use your histogram, look at that for an objective measure of exposure. If you see a spike on the right hand side, you've got some blown out highlights at the time of filming. If the histogram is shoved all the way over to the left, then you've probably underexposed the image and it's all going to look a bit dark, and depending on the quality of your camera, you might not be able to bring that back in post without destroying the image. Fortunately, this question of settings is just something that you have to learn. Take your time, dig into it, learn it, check out all the other videos on our channels because we teach you that stuff. And then once you've learnt it, you can put it to the back of your mind and get on with the creative side of things, which is creating beautiful drone cinematography. Poor understanding of light. The sun is our light source as drone cinematographers, and it plays a huge role in determining the outcome of our shots. Most of that stunning footage that you see on YouTube or on TV and cinema for that matter is filmed in low sun environments, so the golden hours, sunrise and sunset. The sun is low in the sky, it creates nice warm colours, and more importantly than that, it throws long shadows, and that creates depth in your image. Depth is certainly one tool that we're looking for to create a more three-dimensional representation on our little two-dimensional screen. To give you the answer as to what you're looking for here, to make life easier for yourself, have the sun behind the camera. If the sun is behind the camera, it's casting its rays down, illuminating the landscape, the building, whatever the point of interest is that you're filmmaking, and that gives you a nice balanced exposure with your sky and the other parts of your composition in the frame. If the sun is in front of you and in front of the camera, that's going to create this big bright object in the sky, and it's going to make it very difficult for you to expose for both the sky and the ground. That's where in the previous point your histogram becomes so important, and again, depending on the quality of the camera that you have, it's going to handle that situation in different ways. It's a tricky, complex subject. We're now getting right into the realms of cinematography and filmmaking. It just so happens that we have a course on all of this to really get you up to speed, because this is the one thing that is going to differentiate you from the pack when it comes to creating beautiful footage. No shaky footage. Shaky footage is bad. As soon as you see a little blip on the yaw stick or a little bump on the gimbal, forget about it. And it can ruin the best of shots, and it's such a pain. But the bottom line is, as soon as you see that inconsistency in the smooth camera movement, then the shot is over. Forget about it. That being said, if you do have a piece of footage where you've got a little bit of a bump in it, try and stabilise it in post-production. Much of the software nowadays has a warp stabiliser or some kind of post-production stabilisation where it analyses the frame, crops in a little bit, and just kind of adjusts things to smooth things out. So if you have a slightly raggedy tilt reveal, for example, put it through the stabiliser and see if that can fix it. Last but not least, wrong frame rate. We did a video a while back explaining what frame rate you want to use for drone cinematography, looking at the history and the evolution of frame rates in TV and cinema. And the bottom line is, if you're looking for cinematic footage, you want to shoot at 24 frames per second if you're in an NTSC region like the United States, or you want to shoot in 25 frames per second if you're here in Europe. Now, by all means, shoot at a different frame rate. You are more than welcome to. You do whatever you want. But if you listened clearly to what I said there, I said if you want cinematic footage, 24 or 25 frames per second is the one for you. You sounded awfully strict on that one, Blue Shirt Stu. I know where you're coming from though. People do get a bit stressed about it. By all means, if you're a gamer or whatnot, or for YouTube, you want that kind of live action view, that's fine, but for the moment the industry standard in cinema is 24 frames per second. Back in 2012, 2013, Peter Jackson put The Hobbit out in 48 frames per second, and it was absolutely panned by anyone that saw it because it took the viewer out of the story. It just felt like it was a news report as opposed to a piece of cinema. So until our expectations and our thoughts change on that one, you can be the revolutionary if you want, but I would suggest that you stick with 24 or 25 frames per second. Right, so it's been fun working alongside you, Red Shirt Stu. Thank you for putting your digital marketing expertise to good use and so subtly bringing our viewers' attention to our 8-hour drone cinematography masterclass. Link in the description below. I'm not sure what Alina's going to think when she comes back and finds the two of us, mind you. Anyway, don't forget to check out our Instagram page. Stay tuned for more content, and we will see you next time. Happy flying!